What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be breaking down each of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC 285. Hopefully you'll be able to use the information in these videos to make better betting decisions and maybe even earn some extra cash. All of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you in these breakdowns do come from hours and hours and hours of research, as well as years and years and years of experience. I make a living live betting on the UFC as well as football over the last 18 months. As you can see from the profitability chart of my football bets in the background, I've been doing really well betting on football. So the information that I'm going to be sharing with you is coming from a very good place, coming from a lot of experience. With that being said, it is super important to gamble responsibly. It is brutally difficult to make money betting on any kind of sport. I'm profitable on both the UFC and football, but in order to do that, it means I'm literally chained to my desk 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It is brutally difficult. It's not like these guys you see on Instagram, on Twitter, with Gucci tracksuits and suitcases full of cash, and they just live it up in Vegas partying all the time. It is not like that. To be profitable in this game takes a lot of blood, sweat and tears, a lot of hard work, a lot of experience. So if you're not putting that work in, very unlikely you will be profitable. It is very, very hard. So gamble responsibly, do your homework, do your research, and yeah, I hope you'll find the information in this video useful. I'd also like to let you guys know that because we are in early March, you've now got the opportunity to sign up and gain access to all of my football bets for the whole of March. They're delivered through Telegram and they're all live bets on football. You may call it soccer in your country. I bet every single league around the world in lots of different time zones, lots of different kinds of bets, and even if you know nothing about football or soccer, the bets tell you basically exactly what you need to bet, the kind of bet, the league, the teams, that kind of thing. So if you'd like to give it a try, there's a small window until the end of the week to sign up. All you need to do to sign up is come to my website, MMABettingTips.com, go to where it says betting tips, go to football betting tips, and you can sign up there. So for February, the month just gone, we made around 10.6 units of profit for an ROI of about 15%. So at the moment, football is one of my biggest cash cows, doing extremely well on it. As you can see, pretty much, nice non-stop profits most months, and I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into cracking football over the last 18 months, and I feel like I'm there, man. The future is exciting. So if you would like to gain access to my football bets, you can sign up now. MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below. Go to football betting tips, you can sign up there. Now, let's get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be the main event. Let's start off strong. And the main event is obviously Gane versus Jon Jones. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we will just refresh to make sure we've got the latest odds. Here we go. So we can see that Jon Jones is the favourite at average odds of around 1.63, which is minus 159 for an implied probability of 61%. If we take a look at the odds on Gane, he is around an average of 2.40, which is plus 140 for an implied probability of 42%. So Gane is 32 years old, 6'4", with an 81-inch reach, and Jon Jones, 35 years old, 6'4", with an 84.5-inch reach. So it's kind of crazy that Jon Jones is stepping up to compete in the heavyweight division for the first time, and he's actually bigger than Gane with a 3-inch reach advantage. Kind of crazy. They're about the same age, but while we're talking about X factors and the tail of the tape, obviously, we don't know how Jon Jones is going to look at heavyweight. At light heavyweight, he was a cardio machine. He was very fast. He moved very well. It'll be interesting to see exactly what Jon Jones weighs in at on Saturday night. Is he going to weigh, 250 plus pounds? Is he going to come in on the very bottom end of the heavyweight scale, 225 pounds? Because we know, weight and size, it has a big impact on the outcome of MMA fights. That's why we've got weight classes. So I'm interested to see what Jon Jones weighs in at, how he looks at heavyweight, how he moves, and if he's still got the same movement, the same sharpness, the same speed, the same cardio that he had in the light heavyweight division. Of course, it's unlikely he's going to be able to take all those attributes up a weight class with him, but it'll be interesting to see how he looks. On top of that, another X factor that we've got to talk about is the layoff for Jon Jones. We haven't seen him for 3 years now, and he has been very inactive over the last few years because of all his troubles, outside of the octagon, his run-ins with USADA. And for me, this is a major aspect of this fight to consider, because I've been thinking over the last week or so if I can remember any example of a high-level elite fighter like Jon Jones who left the sport for an extended period of time and then were able to come back and basically pick up where they left off. Over the last 14 years, since I've been betting on MMA, a really strong trend that I've seen play out is that when these top fighters, not always necessarily the best fighters, but when fighters who are at the top of their weight class leave the sport for a few years and then come back, the trend is that they almost always look a shadow of themselves. To the extent that when I've been thinking about this over the last few weeks, I honestly can't remember a single fighter that has been able to come back and look anywhere near as good as they did in the past. And what often happens is they often look a complete shell of themselves. Like, consider how Conor McGregor looked in the fights against Nate Diaz and obviously Dustin Poirier, compared to how sharp he looked before all his layoffs due to antics outside the cage. Compare the version of Conor we got against Eddie Alvarez compared to the version of Conor we got against Dustin Poirier. It's like two completely different fighters, right? Unrecognizable. And I think it's because when guys are on the come up, or when they're holding their own at the top of a division, competing against the best fighters in the world every single fight, they're in the gym every day, they're working hard, they're improving, they're making those cumulative gains by training hard in the gym every day. They're eating the best foods, they're deep into strength and conditioning, they're working very hard. And I think when there's an extended period of time when they're not committing hard to the gym every day, they're not committing hard to their diet, they lose those cumulative gains. And the older you get, it becomes impossible to get those cumulative gains back, and then everything starts to unravel. Now, Jon Jones is obviously one of the greatest fighters of all time. He's extremely talented. He's great everywhere. He is also really, really young for a heavyweight, right? 35 years old. He's an absolute baby for the heavyweight division. So if anyone can bounce back, it's going to be Jon Jones, right? Jon Jones is a guy that can do it. But I don't like to bet against strong trends, and I honestly cannot think of a single fighter in the history of combat sports who's been able to bounce back to an elite level. If you can think of one, please leave a comment below and let me know if I'm missing anyone. But I think of examples like, for example, Dominic Cruz, right? Dominic Cruz had a long layoff, came back, won his title back against TJ Dillashaw. But I think with Cruz, shortly after the Dillashaw fight, his athletic performance and career started to unravel. Not only that, Cruz was a dedicated professional, right? We know he's an absolute monster. Probably ate clean the whole time that he was laid off, was probably still trying to work as hard as he could. We know that Cruz hasn't been fucking around with drugs and alcohol like Jon Jones did. Another example would be TJ Dillashaw when he came back and beat Corey Sandhagen, but then again, his career kind of fell apart and unraveled shortly after that, where he struggled very badly against Aljamain Sterling because of the shoulder injury that he had. There's another example, George St. Pierre, when he came back against Michael Bisping, but I thought GSP looked kind of flat and slow in that fight at middleweight. Certainly didn't look as sharp as the GSP, before the long layoff. So I tried to think of a fighter who has, been at the top of the game, gone away, and come back and look just as good as they did before they left. I can't think of any fighter that's been able to do that. We've seen guys like Dillashaw, like Cruz, like the example I gave with, Cruz, Dillashaw, and my mind has gone blank and I've completely forgotten the third example. GSP, right? These guys that have gone away and come back, but I don't feel, even when they had a little bit of success winning when they came back, they still looked a shadow of themselves, nowhere near as good as they were before the layoff. So I don't expect Jones to look very good this weekend, which makes researching this fight really difficult, because when I researched this fight, it's a really good stylistic matchup for Gane. And if you said to me, Chris, Jon is going to look, very similar to how he did before this layoff, I would seriously consider betting him. But with the layoff, with everything that we know he's been caught up in outside of the octagon during that layoff, I honestly feel if we are showing the trend that I've spoken about, the respect it deserves, I think it's quite likely Jon Jones looks absolutely terrible this weekend. And it's a strong trend to fight against. Like I say, I'm a dinosaur. I'm almost 40 years old. I've been doing this for 14 years. And anecdotally, guys that go away for a long time and come back almost always look terrible. If you can think of any exceptions to that rule, there's going to be exceptions, right? There's going to be unicorns, exceptions to the rule. Maybe Jones is that guy that rule doesn't apply to. But I can't think of any. Please leave a comment below. Let me know if you can think of any. So, in terms of how these two match up stylistically, I do think it is a pretty good stylistic matchup for Jon. What I will say about this matchup, though, and I'm going to make some strong statements in this, in this breakdown video, that I'll probably get some criticism for. But ultimately, when I make breakdown videos like this, I think people think I'm just kind of sharing my opinion on stuff. And what I try to reiterate to people is I'm not really sharing my opinion. All I'm doing is researching two fighters. And then when I do these breakdown videos, I'm summarizing to you what I've seen. So if you think I'm one of these guys that can be, that can misread things or, be biased, I understand why you may call what I'm doing an opinion. But I think I'm pretty good at keeping a level head and just reiterating to you what I've seen. And as a result, I will be making some strong statements about Jon Jones in this breakdown that you'll probably disagree with. Let me know in the comments below if you do. But I do think a huge problem in sports is people focus too much on win and loss records. They focus too much on results on paper to try and predict the outcome of a certain sporting event, as opposed to what is actually true. And the only way that you find what is actually true in sports is just by looking at footage to gauge, what the actual real situation is, right? Because win-loss records on paper, results on paper, don't tell us anything about the nature of those losses, where those wins came from, how they came about, right? I think this is why I've got such a big edge betting on football, big edge betting on the UFC. It's because I cut through all the bullshit, ignore the win-loss records, just focus on performances to find out what is true. It's the reason why we made good money betting on Tommy Fury last week against Jake Paul. Everyone was focusing on the win-loss records. Everyone was saying, the records of the guys Tommy Fury has fought like 26 and 114, something like that. Tommy's a joke, all this sort of stuff. When if you just took an hour out your day, watch a little bit of footage, you would have seen Tommy's a much better boxer than Jake Paul. It's not rocket science. It's not complicated. Anyone can do it. It's very easy to see. So in the case of Jon Jones, he is one of the greatest fighters of all time. He's kind of undefeated, right? This disqualification loss was a silly one. So he's undefeated. His record looks great. He's beaten some of the best fighters in the world. But I do feel that he has been kind of lucky in his last two fights. I feel he lost to Dominic Reyes. I also feel that he lost to Thiago Santos. I can't remember what the media scores were for these fights, but when I rewatched both matchups this week, it was pretty clear to me that Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones 3 rounds to 2, and as you can see, the vast majority of people scored that fight for Dominic Reyes, and I also scored the Thiago Santos fight for Santos 3 rounds to 2. So if we look at the scoring on that fight, you can see not as many people scored the fight for Santos. The majority had it for Jones. But I'm showing you this because Jon Jones has basically won 2 coin flips, right? And in the case of the Dominic Reyes fight, it was like, I wouldn't even call it a coin flip, right? Reyes won the fight pretty clear in my opinion. You can see the majority of people scored the fight for Reyes. So when you look at Jon Jones's record, it's very impressive, but there are a lot of red flags. A lot of red flags in his last 2 fights. And I'm going to talk about them in a lot of detail because I do think Ciryl Gane is pretty well positioned to exploit the weaknesses I've seen in Jon in these last 2 fights. I personally feel quite strongly that Jon Jones lost these 2 fights. And so even though his record looks very impressive, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time, he did not look good in his last 2 fights. I mean, consider how bad Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos have looked since these matchups. It wasn't like Jon Jones was in ultra competitive fights against some of the best light heavyweights in the world. It wasn't like he was, just edging guys like Jan Blachowicz when he was doing a damn thing back in 2020, or a Jiri Prohaska. He was scraping past guys like Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos. It ain't good. And a big part of the reason why I feel Reyes and Santos won these fights is because Jon Jones showed truly awful fight IQ in both those matchups. Absolutely dreadful fight IQ. Terrible game planning, terrible strategy. It's one of those things where you would have expected a lot more from a guy like Jon Jones. For him to achieve all the things he's done in his career and to put out performances like that. Absolutely shocking. Jon Jones had the skills, had the ability to absolutely dominate both Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes. All he needed to do was get a little bit busier with his strikes in the first half of the Dominic Reyes fight to tire Reyes out sooner and use a grappling heavy game plan against Thiago Santos. We know Santos has basically no takedown offense, no ground game at all, and yet Jones, for whatever reason, just didn't bother grappling against Santos. It was a razor close fight. He could easily have lost the split decision. The judges gifted him a win. I think Santos won that fight 3 rounds to 2. Then against Dominic Reyes, Jon was getting outstruck by Reyes. He got outstruck in the first 3 rounds of the fight. He was down 3 rounds going into the 4th round, and then he started to grapple hard. And it's just one of those situations where, after the fight, a lot of people online were criticizing the decision, saying it was a bad decision. And Jon justified the decision by saying that he won because he was the aggressor, he had the forward pressure, he had the octagon control. So every once in a while you get a fighter, or you get quite often actually, you get fighters in the UFC that don't really understand how MMA fights are scored. And we know that octagon control, forward pressure, aggression, they're the 3rd tier of MMA scoring, which means, if you only consider those things if striking and grappling is equal, which in the first 3 rounds of this fight they weren't because Reyes outstruck him. So with the Reyes fight, Jon lost the first 3 rounds before he started grappling, which to me shows really bad fight IQ because he let the first 3 rounds slip away from him and then put himself in a position where he needed a finish, or he should have needed a finish in rounds 4 or 5 to win if the judges actually did their job, which they didn't. What was really concerning though was after the fight where he basically thought he won the first 3 rounds because of octagon control, and we know it's not a primary scoring criteria. So I do think Jon's got a bit of bad fight IQ. I think he struggles to put his stamp on rounds. I just think he is perhaps, a little bit out of touch with how fights are scored, and it maybe it costs him against Ciryl Gane because he did the same thing against Thiago Santos where he thought octagon control, forward pressure, aggression would get him a lot of points. They didn't, because again he almost lost the split decisions. He got outstruck from Thiago Santos on the outside. So this is one of those matchups where if the fight stays standing, I do think Ciryl Gane will win the fight, which is why it is a dangerous fight for Jon Jones, because I feel in order for Jon to win this, he needs to use a grappling heavy game plan. If the fight stays standing, I think Gane's going to be able to land the more impactful shots. I think Gane's the better boxer. We know Jon, for the most part, has got a predominantly kicks-based style of striking, and I think Jon's really going to struggle to get inside on Ciryl Gane. Jon absolutely needs to use grappling in this fight. If it stays standing, he is in a lot of trouble. But we know, based on Ciryl Gane's performance against Francis Ngannou, that Gane's takedown offense and ground game is an absolute joke. Like, I don't need to show you footage of how bad it is. It's all fresh in our mind. And we know that Jon Jones is a phenomenal offensive wrestler and a world-class grappler. When we consider Jon Jones, we often visualize his fights as being stand-up fights where he uses his length very well to chip away at his opponents from behind, his long reach with his range-finding kicks, his long punches. But when Jon actually grapples, he is an absolute nightmare. And I just want to show you a little bit of footage of what I'm talking about, because what we know for sure is that Jon Jones is a far better offensive wrestler than Francis Ngannou. So if Francis Ngannou can take Cyril Gane down and dominate him on the ground, imagine what Jon Jones is going to be able to do. Now, I don't know if this video will get flagged for copyright if I upload this clip. Hopefully it won't, because, under fair use copyright law, I should just be able to show you a couple seconds of clips here. But I may have to blur this part of the video out on YouTube. If you want to watch the uncensored version, head on over to my website, mabettingtips.com, link in the description below. But anyway, don't sue me, Dana. Fair use copyright laws. Just want to show all my home dogs on YouTube, all my friends on YouTube, just some clips of Jon Jones's offensive wrestling so they can appreciate how much trouble he could cause Cyril Gane with a grappling heavy game plan in this fight. So we're going to go to the 4th round. Remember, I said that Jon didn't really grapple for the first 3 rounds of this fight. There was the odd takedown attempt here and there, but he just didn't fully commit to any takedowns. He fully committed in the 4th and 5th. Take a look at how good his offensive wrestling is. So we're early in this 4th round here, and just want to show you the takedown entries of Jon, how effective he is with offensive wrestling. And I mean, look at this, we're in the 4th round as well. Okay, this brings me to a really good point, actually. And another thing I criticize Jon for. So we know that as fighters get older, they lose their reflexes a little bit. They're not as sharp, not as fast as they used to be. What I noticed from Jon Jones's last 2 fights against Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos is that I do think his reflexes are starting to go a bit. Because what I saw in both those matchups is he got caught cold a lot, where he would kind of get caught with a clean shot and then he would react to it after it landed, which is a sign that his reflexes are starting to go. I'm going to show you like a very short instance of where that happens in the Dominic Reyes fight to highlight my point. And if you want to go into more depth on that yourself, just go watch the Reyes fights. Go watch the Santos fight and you'll see it happens to Jon frequently. So just watch here, right? Watch this punch that Reyes lands. Any second now. See that right hook there and the left hook there. See how Jon just isn't really reading Reyes particularly well. He's eating clean, hard shots. Which is why I said at the beginning of this video, if the fight stays standing, I think Cyril Gane is going to dominate, because not only is Cyril Gane's footwork, movement, striking defense a lot better than Jon Jones's, but he lands harder, more impactful shots than Jon as well. Even though Gane is more of a volume striker at heavyweight, we saw what he could do in the Tai Tuivasa fight, where he really sits down hard on his punches and lets his hands go. I honestly feel if this fight stays standing, it will be very easy for Gane. However, it won't. Gane's advantages on the feet won't mean anything if Jon grapples. And look at a bit of his offensive wrestling here. Jon's grappling is beautiful. Gets the body lock here. Looks for the inside trip, doesn't get it, but jumps right back in on the double leg. Gets the body lock here. Looks for the outside trip with his left leg. Doesn't get it, but drives through on a double leg. So what Jon's showing us here is we're in the 5th round now. And we're in the 4th round now, and even in this 4th round, look at Jon. He's got the energy to chain wrestle, persist hard with a takedown, generate a lot of drive and fully commit to the takedowns. If Jon Jones does this from the 1st round against Cyril Gane is kind of screwed, because we've seen how bad his takedown offense and ground game was against Ngannou. I mean, look at this takedown entry. Jon changes levels, drives in deep on the legs, drives him over to the cage, connects his hands together. gets to the body lock. It's just good chain wrestling. It's just good work from Jon, man. And we know Dominic Reyes' takedown offense is pretty good. You know, if Jon were to shoot these kind of takedowns on Gane, he would get him down, no problem. We go to the 5th round. More of the same. Look at this. 30 seconds into round 5. Beautiful double leg entry. Gets his hands connected and yanks Reyes' legs out from underneath him. You know, wrist control on the right side there. Gets the body lock. It's good stuff from Jon Jones, man. Looks to take the back. It's just good stuff. You know, look, chain wrestling in on the double leg, doesn't get it. High crotch single leg. He's chaining into lots of different takedown attempts, and we're talking about the 5th round of a light heavyweight fight, right? Jon's not even breathing heavy here. He's barely broken a sweat. He looks phenomenal, but it was a really disappointing performance for me, because if Jon would have done that from the 1st round, he would have totally dominated Dominic Reyes. He didn't start to commit to his grappling until round 4, when he was already down 3 rounds, which is the reason why I believe he lost the fight, and so many others did as well, scoring the fight for Reyes. So that performance against Reyes does indicate a bit of bad fight IQ from Jon. And ultimately, what all this means is that the outcome of this fight is going to be determined by what game plan and strategy Jon Jones uses, in my opinion. So long as he hasn't declined to the point where, you know, he's a total shadow of himself and his cardio's gone, everything's gone, right? But if Jon Jones shows up and looks anything like he did in the past, I believe if he comes in, grapples hard from round 1, I believe he'll dominate Ciryl Gane. If he tries to win a kickboxing match and just, you know, use takedowns here and there, maybe not fully commit to the takedowns, I think Gane will smoke him on the feet. I really think Gane will have a lot of success on the feet in this fight. So really, it's an impossible fight to predict, an impossible fight to bet, because you can't feel confident on either side without knowing how much grappling Jon's going to use, because we know he's reluctant to use it. He doesn't usually use his grappling that much. He certainly didn't against Thiago Santos. Will he come in, fight smart, grapple hard against Gane? Will he try to win a kickboxing match? Who knows? Without knowing the answer to that question, how can we bet this fight? Very, very difficult. For me personally, if you want to bet this fight on the money line front, I do think Ciryl Gane gives you the better risk to reward ratio, just because we know Jon doesn't like to use grappling heavy game plans in fights, and we know if the fight stays standing, Ciryl Gane probably wins pretty comfortably. On top of that, we don't know how Jon looks in the heavyweight division. We also don't know how Jon looks after the 3-year layoff. He could look a shadow of himself. Perhaps he doesn't have the cardio to grapple hard for 5 rounds anymore. So with that being said, I do think Ciryl Gane gives you the better risk to reward ratio at dog odds. I do think this is a dog or pass fight. If you really, really, really want to bet this fight, I would take Ciryl Gane. I'm not going to be betting him personally, and I don't think you should either, because if Jon does grapple hard and he does look like anything he used to look like back in 2020, Gane is screwed. So why would you want to bet this fight? Very risky, no matter who you go with. But leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this matchup and how you see it going. So, in terms of the over-under on this one, I do think the fight's more likely to go to a decision. I do. However, again, for me, it is risky to bet that, because obviously, if Jon did use a grappling heavy game plan, we've seen Ciryl Gane is totally helpless on the ground, very bad ground game, very bad off his back, doesn't really know how to defend himself, so I could easily see Jon, you know, mounting Gane and getting a finish with ground and pound, or finishing Gane by submission. On top of that, you know, if Jones is a shell of himself, if he is rusty, you know, if he can't hang with these heavyweights, then Gane could knock him out, right? We've just seen that 4th round against Dominic Reyes where, you know, Jon was eating clean, hard shots on the feet. You know, if his chin's gone, he's been abusing his body over the last 3 years with drugs and alcohol. Who knows how durable Jon is, you know, in 2023. Father time's undefeated. I know Jon isn't old for a heavyweight at 35 years old, but he did start his career very young. He has been in a lot of wars. He has taken a lot of damage, and it sounds like outside of the octagon he's put his body through a lot of abuse as well, which can catch up with him at any time. You know, look what happened to Conor McGregor in the Dustin Poirier fights. So it's one of those things where I do think the fight's more likely to go the distance, but I would not bet it. personally I would give this one a miss. In terms of prop bets, prop bets that interest me are, you know what, there aren't really any props that interest me, if I'm being brutally honest. There's not too many props here that interest me. I would give the props a miss. There's no props. None of them really jumping out at me there. So let's now move on to breaking down the next fight, which is going to be Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. The bullet returns. The bullet against the Mexican beauty, Alexa Grasso. Okay, let's take a look at the odds. So Valentina Shevchenko is the favourite at average odds of around 1.15, which is going to be minus 667 for an implied probability of 87%. If you take a look at the odds on Alexa Grasso, she is around an average of 5.50, which is going to be plus 450 for an implied probability of 18%. So Alexa Grasso is 29 years old, 5'5" with a 66-inch reach. Shevchenko, 34 years old, 5'5" with a 65.5-inch reach. So obviously Valentina's 5 years older than Grasso, but both girls pretty much the exact same size. Now, Valentina Shevchenko is a fighter who obviously has huge issues on the ground. Her takedown offense isn't great, her ground game isn't great, but I don't think Alexa Grasso is the fighter to exploit that weakness. As a result, I do think this is going to be a pretty easy night's work for Shevchenko and one of the worst stylistic matchups imaginable for Alexa Grasso. So, as you guys know, I haven't been that complimentary towards Shevchenko's grappling in her last few fights, and if you watch my channel a lot, you'll also know I recommended a bet on Taylor Santos to beat Valentina Shevchenko at big dog odds in her last fight. Santos almost came through for us, just fell short, losing a split decision at big dog odds. Is a pretty good bet, but styles make fights, and even though Taylor Santos would probably smoke Alexa Grasso, if we're being brutally honest, Shevchenko is the kind of fighter who, in my opinion, is just better than Grasso everywhere. So when you look at how these two match up stylistically, it's difficult to see a realistic scenario in which Shevchenko could lose this fight, because Alexa Grasso's biggest weakness is also her grappling, and we know that Shevchenko is still quite a physically imposing grappler. She's got a heavy top game, good offensive wrestling. We've seen her use grappling heavy game plans to defeat Jessica Andrade, Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Chookagian. I know that, Grasso is, perhaps better than some of those names that I've just mentioned. However, Grasso is still weak off her back. She is still easy to take down. Shevchenko, very physically imposing grappler, very strong, good gas tank. I think Shevchenko can easily use a grappling heavy game plan here to take Grasso down and dominate her on the ground. Now, if the fight were to stay standing, which is obviously what Grasso would like with her being a striker, I still think Shevchenko does pretty well here. She may not be able to match the volume of Grasso, but she's a lot faster, a lot sharper, a lot more athletic, has a lot more power and pop in her shots. We know Grasso is just a volume striker, really. She chips away at you with volume, chips away at you with boxing. But Shevchenko, no doubt, is going to be the fighter landing the harder, nastier, more damaging, more impactful shots. So even though Grasso may outstrike Shevchenko in terms of volume, it's going to be very difficult for her to score points in the eyes of the judges, because when Shevchenko lands, she's really going to be hurting Grasso and inflicting big damage. So this is one of those fights where, for me, obviously there's no upside in betting on Shevchenko as a big favourite, right? Very, very little upside. At the same time, I'm not tempted to bet Grasso at big underdog odds either, simply because her path to victory is so narrow. It would be such a speculative bet and just too big of a gamble for me to take. So I'm not interested in Grasso either. I think this fight is a very, very easy pass. Can't touch Shevchenko at these odds. Grasso, you're probably lighting your money on fire as well. So if we take a look at the over-under on this fight, we can see that fight goes with decision is at dog odds. I would actually prefer to take that over fight doesn't go to decision. It's not something I'm going to be betting, but if you want to bet the over-under on this matchup, I do think the fight to go to decision gives you a better risk to reward ratio at dog odds than fight doesn't go to a decision, simply because Alexa Grasso is very tough. You take a look at Shevchenko's record. She's gone deep with Lauren Murphy. She's gone the distance with Taylor Santos. She's gone the distance with Jennifer Maia. She's gone the distance with Carmouche, distance with Jan Jacek. A lot of girls do go the distance with Shevchenko. If you look at Grasso's record, she is 15-3, but she has only ever been finished one time by Tatiana Suarez. Now, obviously, Shevchenko's a lot better and a lot more dangerous than a lot of the girls Grasso has gone the distance with, who have been unable to finish her. But at the same time, Grasso still pretty tough, and I do think at dog odds, fight goes to a decision. Just gives you a better risk to reward ratio. I'm not going to be betting it personally, but if you want to bet the over under, that's what I would go for. Now, in terms of prop bets on this one, Shevchenko by decision is the one that jumps out at me, but odds of 3.0 plus 200, that just doesn't get me excited. I'd pass on that. I think those odds are pretty dead. Don't see any value there, and yeah, that's the most likely outcome in my opinion, but the odds are pretty crap for such a specific outcome on a prop bet such as that. So I would give that a pass. I would not be betting that. So yeah, I hope you found that useful. Bit of a dead fight from a betting point of view, and should be an easy night's work for Shevchenko. Speaking of easy night's work, I think we've got another very easy night's work here for Mr. Shavkat Rakhmonov, who has been blessed by being able to fight Jeff Neal. So if we can take a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Rakhmonov is in a similar odds range to Shevchenko. Big favourite at average odds of around 1.19, which is minus 526 for an implied probability of 84%. And if we take a look at the odds on his opponent Jeff Neal, we can see that he's around an average of 5.0, which is plus 400 for an implied probability of 20%. So Jeff Neal is 32 years old, 5'11", with a 75-inch reach. Rakhmonov, 28 years old, 6'1", with a 77-inch reach. So this is another one of those matchups similar to Grasso versus Shevchenko, where I feel that Rakhmonov has got basically every single advantage you could want in an MMA fight. He's bigger, he's longer, he's a better grappler, and in my opinion, even though Jeff Neal's a striker, I believe Rakhmonov is a better striker as well. This is a total checkmate fight, silly matchmaking, pointless fight in my eyes, and a matchup where, you know, Neal is kind of being thrown to the wolves here. I really don't give him much of a chance of winning at all. It's very rarely that I talk. It's very rare that I talk in absolutes in MMA. It's very rare that I'll use expressions like, you know, this guy's got no chance. We know when it comes to betting, everyone's got a chance. But in the context of mixed martial arts fights, I think Jeff Neal has about as close to no chance of winning as is possible in an MMA fight. It's just a very, very silly matchup because to me, even though Jeff Neal hits hard, Rakhmonov moves so well on the feet, he's so technical, it's so difficult to get inside and land clean on him. And even if Neal were to have success on the feet, we know Rakhmonov is one of the best offensive wrestlers in the division. Amazing offensive wrestling, great combat sambo, great chain wrestling, heavy top game, nasty submission game. Rakhmonov will be able to take Neal down anytime he wants in this fight and absolutely dominate Jeff Neal. It is a silly fight in my opinion, and I don't know why the UFC have put this matchup together. You know, it should be a cakewalk for Rakhmonov. Unfortunately, his odds reflect that, and he's a massive favourite. For me, there's very little upside in betting on, you know, fighters in this odds range. You've got to put up so much money to get any kind of meaningful return. It's not for me. Other guys like to do it. What I would say is this: if you are okay betting big favourites, I think Rakhmonov's the kind of big favourite that you want to bet, because I would be absolutely amazed if he loses this. Now, in terms of the over-under, I do think fight doesn't go to decision is the most likely outcome. The odds are absolutely terrible, so I would not be betting it. But when you look at how aggressively Rakhmonov has pursued the finish in all of his fights in the UFC so far, he's got 4 fights, 4 finishes. And when you look at how bad Jeff Neal is on the ground, I think Rakhmonov's going to be able to get the fight to the ground whenever he wants. And as soon as he starts, you know, overwhelming Neal with ground and pound, hunting for submissions, I just don't think Neal is at that level on the ground where he's going to defend himself or be able to defend himself for 15 minutes. I think it'll only be a matter of time before he gets finished. So I think the fight ends inside the distance, but again, I wouldn't bet it at these odds. These odds are too short for me. Absolutely terrible. If we look at the props on this matchup, we can see that where are we? Okay, if we can look at the props, Rakhmonov by knockout TKO, terrible odds. Rakhmonov by submission, terrible odds. Yeah, props completely dead on that fight. Dead fight for betting. I'm not interested. And yeah, I would give that fight a miss if I were you. Completely dead fight from a betting point of view. Alright, now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Jalin Turner against Mateusz Gamrot. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Gamrot is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.45, which is going to be minus 222 for an implied probability of 69%. We take a look at the odds on Jalin Turner. He is around an average of 2.80, which is going to be plus 180 for an implied probability of 36%. So Jalin Turner is 27 years old, 6'3" with a 75.5-inch reach, and Mateusz Gamrot is 32 years old, 5'10" with a 70.5-inch reach. So obviously we can see there Turner is going to be a lot taller than Mateusz Gamrot, and he's got a massive 5-inch reach advantage. And I do think this is going to be one of those fights where at the ceremonial weigh-in stare-downs on Friday night, I think the size difference between these two is going to be absolutely comedic. I think Turner is going to absolutely tower over Gamrot and have a massive size advantage. The problem with Turner is that he's also got a lot of the negative traits that are associated with guys that are abnormally long and tall for their division. So it's quite apt, actually, that Turner is competing on the same card as Jon Jones, because one of the things that has made Jon Jones so great throughout his career is that he has that long, lean, rangy body type, but none of the negative attributes that are associated with it. So if you think about guys like Turner that are abnormally long and tall for the division, you know, guys like Stefan Struve, Curtis Melender, Jalin Turner, you know, guys like this that are very long and tall are usually very easy to take down, very easy to hold down, and also quite chinny and easy to hit as well. And unfortunately, Turner has all of those weaknesses, which makes this a very difficult stylistic matchup for him, because even though he's going to be a lot bigger than Gamrot and the more technical striker out of the two, we know Gamrot hits very hard. We know he's aggressive and can cover distance very quickly. So Turner's going to be wide open to the knockout shot from Gamrot. And on top of that, we know Gamrot is also a really good offensive wrestler. So we should be able to get Jalin Turner down no problem. And before we continue with this breakdown video and go into the nuances about how both these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, I just want to show you a little bit of footage on Jalin Turner to kind of back up that you know, those things that I've just said. Again, showing you this footage, and fair use copyright law, Dana, please don't sue me. But if I do have to blur out this footage because the YouTube copyright algorithm, please head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, where you'll be able to see the uncensored version of this video. So I want to show you two things in this clip against Jamie Mullarkey. I want to show you Turner's poor striking defense and susceptibility to eating big, hard, clean shots that could get him knocked out. I also want to show you Turner's takedown offense and ground game, or lack thereof. So what we will do is pay close attention to how easy it is to land clean, hard shots on Turner. So we'll cycle through and wait till we get some examples of where Mullarkey comes forward and attacks Turner. So you can see Turner does a good job of using his length. He's very, very sharp and very technical, but not the best defensively, like a lot of guys that are abnormally long and tall. So we just skip through, see some examples shortly. It's quite interesting, actually, how we saw Jon Jones eating some big shots of that fourth round against Dominic Reyes as well. And you can see it there, right? Turner comes forward aggressively. Watch the left hand of Mullarkey. See how it wobbles him? Just lands on the temple. If we slow the footage right down, you can see it clearer. Watch the left hand of Mullarkey and look at the legs of Turner. So Turner's coming forward, hands down low. Mullarkey catches him with the left hand. Boom. Top of the head. And look, Turner's wobbled there. And if we speed it back up, we can see the Turner's just very reckless. Comes forward aggressively. Hands down low. Chin up high. There to be hit. Sitting duck to the knockout. I will see if we can find some more examples in this Mullarkey fight. You can see, just comes forward, hands down low. But look, Turner just doesn't move his head like in this sequence. When he comes forward, he's just not moving his head. So he's wide open to big counters. And of course, he's very technical. He does move very well. He does use his length well. But he's also very hittable. Defense, not the best. Just doesn't move his head. Gets in the big exchanges. Like you look at this exchange now. Again, it's a big left hand here. Watch, left hand. It's another left hand there. I mean, look how close this was to landing right on the chin. Turner actually wipes his mouth after it lands. Watch, not this one. Watch the follow-up. That one just deflects off the shoulder. Watch this short left hand now. Boom. Right on the chin. You see Turner actually wipes his face there as if to say, whew, that was close. That was close, right? So, see, it's a head kick there. Again, it's just exchanges like this. Watch. Comes forward, hands down low, chin up high. Eats a big right hand here. Watch. Big left hand from Mullarkey. Bang. But Turner just stands in front of him playing rock'em sock'em robots. Look at this. They're just brawling. Look at this. They're just brawling. But we know Gamrot hits very hard. He's got a good amount of power in his hands. And even though Mullarkey couldn't make Turner pay in these exchanges, maybe Gamrot can go one step further and knock Turner out. I mean, look at this right hand here. Like, Turner doesn't even see it coming. He doesn't even move. Mullarkey misses the target, but Turner just doesn't even move. Watch the right hand. Watch it. Watch the right hand. Turner's head just doesn't move. Just flies right back past his head. Imagine if that lands clean on the chin. And again, look at this. Look at this sequence here. You already saw it in real time. Look at this sequence, man. Turner just doesn't move his head. Look at this. Look at this. Just doesn't move his head. Just Mullarkey just misses. Look at that. He just doesn't move his head. And anyway, so Turner is a sitting duck on the feet. And his takedown offense is also very, very bad. So here we are. 1 minute left to go in the round. Take a look at how easily Turner gives this takedown up. Mullarkey grabs a hold of a single leg. Doesn't get it. But you can see once the takedowns, he drives it on a double leg. Easily puts Turner on the ground into side control. Now we're a minute left in round one. Look at how weak Turner looks off his back here. Just kind of lies there. Just kind of lies there for a minute. Mullarkey stays in side control. Stays heavy and tight. And you can see Turner flat on his back. Shoulders flat on the canvas. Looking super, super weak. Making no effort to scoot his butt over to the cage, which is here. Here. You can't see it. My face cam's in the way. You can kind of see it down there, right? Making no effort to scoot his butt over to the cage to wall walk. No effort to get to his knees to try and scramble back up to his feet. He's just kind of lying there. Mullarkey almost mounts him. He uses that to recover full guard. But you can see very, 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 very weak off his back. Very weak off his back. Mullarkey easily advances from full guard to half guard. And just totally cruises from top position. So, what does that mean in the context of this fight? Well, obviously, Turner is a much better striker than Gamrot, right? More technical, fights longer, throws a more diverse range of attacks, throws a higher volume of strikes as well. But we know Gamrot, very aggressive, has no problem biting down on the mouthpiece, coming forward, committing hard to his power punches. And like we've seen, Turner is a sitting duck on the feet, very susceptible to the knockout. His record is 13-5, and if you look at his record, he has been knocked out there. He's been knocked out there. he has been knocked out there. So 3 of his 5 career losses are by knockout. He is a knockout waiting to happen. And even though Gamrot is primarily a grappler, would not be at all surprised if he KO'd Turner dead in the same way that he was able to catch Scott Holtzman and KO him. So when it comes to grappling, I have been very critical of Gamrot's grappling since he came to the UFC. I don't think Gamrot is a particularly good grappler. I think the main issue with Gamrot's grappling is that he just doesn't have that much physicality to his grappling. He doesn't have a particularly heavy top game. So what you'll see from Gamrot in his fights is his offensive wrestling is phenomenal. His offensive wrestling is absolutely brilliant. The timing he's got on his double leg takedowns is amazing. Gamrot is very, very, very good at getting you to the ground. Gamrot's problem is because he lacks physicality to his grappling, he struggles to hold you down, which is why I've bet against Gamrot in so many of his fights in the UFC, because even though he's got the skills to get his opponents to the ground, he doesn't have the skills to hold them down. And we've seen that in the Tazrukian fight, Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, we saw it in the Beneil Dariush fight. But it doesn't matter if you don't have that much physicality to your grappling. It doesn't matter if you don't have a heavy top game if you're facing someone like Jalen Turner that is ultra weak off their back. So it doesn't matter that Gamrot usually struggles to hold guys down, because if Turner's just going to lie on his back and make no effort to get back up to his feet, Gamrot is going to be able to hold him down and rack up a lot of top control easily. So this is a fight where I think Gamrot can actually have a lot of success with his grappling. I feel since Gamrot came to the UFC, he's struggled to use his grappling to help him win fights, right? He struggled to hold down Kuta Taladze. He struggled to hold down Holtzman. Got a quick submission against Stevens, doesn't tell us much. Was struggling to hold down Ferreira. Didn't hold down Tazrukian. Didn't hold down Dariush. But I think this is going to be the first time this weekend where we actually see Gamrot put on a grappling clinic, because with how easy Turner is to take down, with how weak he is off his back, Gamrot should be able to get him down, absolutely dominate on the ground. The problem is, even though this is one of those fights where I think Gamrot is a lot better than Turner everywhere, well, that's not fair. Gamrot isn't as good of a striker as Turner, but I don't think it'll matter because of, you know, Turner's chinniness, Gamrot's aggression on the feet, and Gamrot's grappling, right? I think that will be enough to give Gamrot a huge edge in this fight. However, I can't bet Gamrot in this matchup, and the reason why I can't bet him is because his odds are too steep. His odds of 1.45, which is minus 222, carry an implied probability of 69%. So I've got to give Gamrot a better than 70% chance of winning this fight, which I can't do because he's got a bad gas tank. We know he slows down a lot as fights wear on. He slowed down against Carlos Diego Ferreira. He slowed down against Guram Tutataladze, and he slowed down against Beneil Dariush. He didn't slow down against Tazrukian, and if he shows up with the kind of gas tank we saw from him against Tazrukian, he will cause Turner huge problems. But we know more often than not in a 3-round fight, Gamrot will slow down a lot in the second half of the fight, past like the 6 or 7 minute mark. For that reason, I can't bet him at big favourite odds. There's no way I can cap him at above 70%. But this is one of those matchups where I do think he does win a pretty big percentage of the time. Unfortunately, his odds reflect that and there's no value there. But what that does mean is I would not touch Turner. I do not think this is dog or pass. I do think Gamrot gets it done. I'm just not comfortable with the odds. So if you really, really, really want to bet this fight, I would take Gamrot. Just know you are not getting a very good risk to reward ratio in the odds, because his advantages are baked into the odds and his odds are exactly where they should be. So it's an easy pass, but I expect Gamrot to get the job done. Now, in terms of the over-under on this one, I don't think the fight will go to a decision. I think it is quite likely Turner gets himself knocked out or submitted on the ground, with how dangerous Gamrot is on the feet, how bad Turner is on the ground. But again, the odds are pretty terrible. I don't see much upside in betting that, so I wouldn't take that personally. In terms of the prop bets on this one, Gamrot by submission, pretty steep. Gamrot by knockout or TKO, pretty steep as well. Odds are pretty terrible on this fight. I would probably give the props on this one a miss. Pretty dead card from a prop betting point of view, or pretty dead main card. Perhaps we can dig up some decent bets on the prelim fights. But yeah, none of the props are that interesting to me there. So now let's break down the final fight on this card. On this main card, between Bo Nickal and Jamie Pickett. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Nickal, biggest favourite on the card, which is quite impressive considering he's on the same card as fighters like Valentina Shevchenko and Shavkat Rakhmonov. But Nickal is the biggest favourite on the card, 1.06, and the odds on this matchup tell you all you need to know about Pickett's chances of winning this. Minus 1,666 for an implied probability of 94%. Compared to Mr. Pickett, is even worth checking his odds. 10.5, which is plus 950. Is not very often I have to quote odds like that for an implied probability of around 10% rounded up. So Jamie Pickett, 34 years old, 6'2" with an 80-inch reach. Bo Nickal, 27 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Well, does the tail of the tape even matter? Both guys roughly the same size. Pickett, a little bit of a reach advantage. Don't think it's going to mean anything in the context of this fight. We're very critical of the UFC's matchmaking with the Jeff Neal Shavkat Rakhmonov fight, and this one is just as ridiculous. Totally pointless fight. Makes no sense to me. Don't know how a fight like this is entertaining or productive for anyone. And I don't understand why the UFC have put it together. They're just basically throwing Pickett to the wolves. It's a stupid fight. In Jamie Pickett's last matchup, we saw Denis Chulinlin, who's a Russian kickboxer, have a lot of success against Pickett on the ground. Remember, Chulinlin got taken down and absolutely dominated in his last fight by Jun Park, who's a Korean boxer. So I know MMA math doesn't mean anything, but if Jamie Pickett was, taken down and, put in bad positions on the ground by a guy that got totally dominated on the ground by a Korean boxer, Pickett's chances of beating an elite grappler like Bo Nickal probably aren't great if we're being realistic. Maybe Pickett catches Nickal with a big shot on the feet. Everyone's got a puncher's chance. Maybe Pickett lands a Hail Mary and knocks Bo Nickal out. But as soon as Nickal grabs a hold of Pickett, I would imagine he is booking Pickett a one-way ticket to Suplex City. And I'd imagine things get real bad for Pickett on the ground as soon as Nickal goes to his grappling. So terrible fight for Pickett. Stupid fight. Pointless fight. Don't understand why the UFC put matchups like this together. It's a waste of time for everyone, in my opinion. Maybe I'm just a little bit salty because I obviously make a living live betting on the UFC as well as football. Now I do well on football, but for the most part, my bread and butter is live betting UFC. You can't live bet fights like this. Total shit, totally pointless, and a waste of my time, in my opinion. What can you do? What can you do? What is there to talk about? Pickle. Nickal should take Pickett down and dominate him. Fight doesn't go to a decision. Big favourites, yeah, I guess so. Prop bets, yeah, completely dead. Everything Nickal related, very, very short. What can you do? Dead fight for betting. One of the deadest fights for betting I've seen in a long time. So that is it for this breakdown video. I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the like button below if you like it. Also leave a comment. That would help me out a great deal. If you like these breakdown videos, you want to watch breakdowns for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to MMABettingTips.com. Link for that in the description below. You can also sign up for football betting tips right now. Doing extremely well. I think you'll like them. With that being said, have a great weekend. Hope you make some money this weekend. Hope you make some cash. See you next week where I will be breaking down next week's card. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.